record this sessions. Yeah, we're going to record the session and also share it afterwards on our portal. So that's good. Welcome everybody to our first webinar of this year with our country ambassador in Israel, Meirav. She's in the airport.
At Budapest.
So, yes, in Budapest. Very happy to have you here. EWPN is a network of women in payment banking and fintech. And yeah, there's a lot of expertise in this network that we would love to share with everybody. And our main purpose, of course, is to help people progress in their careers and build a more inclusive and diverse financial industry. And I think it's interesting to see, Meirav, how this technology actually contributes to that, right? It's the decentralization of ownership, it's the digitalization of ownership, and maybe the democratization of ownership in that sense. So I think very much looking forward to your presentation.
My pleasure.
Everybody, please ask your questions in the chat. So use the chat. I will keep an eye on them. Meirav will build in some pauses for everybody to ask a question. But let's kick off this exciting topic. Meirav, the floor is yours.
Yay. All right. So I'm going to be sharing my screen, and let's make sure that it works properly. Can you see my presentation screen?
Yep.
All right. Let's see if it fills the whole screen. Everything's fine. You can see everything?
Yeah. Perfect.
Well, hi, everybody. First of all, I'm very excited to be here with you guys. I'm the Israeli ambassador to EWPN for the last 6 years, and I very much believe in the cause of this network. And so thank you for having me, and thank you for being here with us. And today we're going to be speaking a little bit about digital currencies, NFTs, and empowering diversification. And before I start, I'm going to say a few words, a little bit of background about myself. I'm a veteran in the fields of finance and technology for over, it's embarrassing to say 20 years, combining the two before they were named Fintech. I was the business development manager and product manager of Lumitrade, one of the biggest security trading websites in Israel. I left about 5 years ago and was the COO of Bancor, which is a blockchain company that raised $153 million in a crowd sale. Later, I became a COO of another blockchain company in Monaco. And now I'm also COOing in another company in the fields of NFTs in the metaverse. And originally I was a programmer in the dot-com era. Later, I became an investment consultant by the Israeli Security Authority. I was chosen as one of the 100 most inspirational women in blockchain in 2020. And I work with regulators, banks, startups, companies, private individuals about everything that has to do with moving ahead with financial technology. And well, we're here talking about something that's kind of like happening around us, and we're seeing news articles and different posts about new NFT sales and celebrities going into it. And then Quentin Tarantino wants to put cut scenes or uncut scenes from the movies on and create them into NFTs. And then the producer company goes angry at that. And then we see Alfa Romeo creating an NFT, and Nike and Adidas and Gucci. And it seems like everybody's kind of like going around NFTs. And what is happening here? What are we talking about? What is this thing? That's what we're going to be going over during this presentation. And before I start, I would like to ask, ladies and gentlemen here, who here owns NFTs? And you can raise your hand, or you can open your microphone and say that. One person? How many do we have, Esther? Can you see?
I own one too.
Two. All right. And how many people?
And we have approximately 40 people in the call.
All right. And okay, I'm going to ask who created an NFT and put it on OpenSea. All right. So we're in for a treat. We're starting from the basics.
Eager audience, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so we're ready
Cool.
from the, okay, so what are we going to be doing today at this presentation? We're going to be going over, first of all, understanding what NFTs are. We're going to be speaking a little bit about the technology that is used in blockchain. I'm going to explain blockchain and kind of like have everybody here feel comfortable with what that means. We're going to be looking at leading implementations and see where diversification is and can be benefiting. We're going to be looking a little bit about the legal aspects or the do's and don'ts of creating and buying NFTs, and mostly points of notice as a buyer or a creator. And one of the interesting things is to see where NFTs are leading to, and is this only for art, or what's happening around us, and where is this all taking us? So let's start with the first question. What are NFTs? So the word NFT stands for non-fungible tokens. And the idea with NFTs is that we're talking about interchangeable, or actually an NFT is a non-interchangeable unit of data that is stored on the blockchain, okay? And we're going to talk about what a blockchain is in a minute. And it can be associated with a particular asset that can be sold or traded, okay? So you can think of it actually like a certificate of ownership, okay? And you can just see it. We're going to see it. We're going to go into this a little bit deeper, but it's like a certificate of ownership that points to an asset. And this asset that it points to can be a digital asset, okay, which could be a photo, a video, an audio, a GIF, or it could also be a real world physical asset, okay? And the NFT also includes the license of how a person can use this asset for a specific purpose. We're going to go deeper into that and show examples, but in order to understand where this kind of meets us and why this change is happening right now, we need to kind of like understand what blockchain is. So for the next 1 minute, I'm going to be explaining what blockchain is so that all of us can kind of like understand why NFTs are so exciting and what change they create from a regular certificate that we have, because, you know, all of us own a house and there is a certificate that we own it, and all of us own a car and there is a certificate. It's just kept at government institutions or at companies, and, you know, we all own assets, but they're written somewhere. So what's the big deal about NFTs and why is this craze happening? So what is blockchain? So blockchain kind of comes to take care of a problem that humanity has been dealing with for the last, you know, thousands of years, and that is the need to keep track of ownership and transactions, okay? So theoretically, if humans transact and have ownership, and let's take an example, let's say me and Esther decide to trade and I give her 10,000 euros and she gives me a car in return, okay? There is always the problem that could happen in a few months, a few years, that one of us will come and say, oh, wait, I wasn't paid, or wait, that car is mine. So humanity had to deal with this issue, and the solution that they found for, you know, the last millenniums was to put in a third party, okay, somebody in the middle that keeps track of who owns what and what transaction happens, right? Like this little red person here in the middle, okay? And for every transaction, that middleman writes down who is the owner right now, and if there was a transaction and where it moved from one place to the other. The only issue is that having a third party person keeping track of ownership has a few downsides and problems that could happen. One of them is that what if the records are breached or destroyed, okay, of whatever he's keeping track of, and what if this third party suddenly favors one side as opposed to the other, or what if it becomes untrustworthy? Or what if there are inefficiencies there? Let's say the third party says, oh, I only work 4 hours a day and you're going to pay me a lot of money, because he knows that he is so needed, okay? And the thing is that humanity did not much have a solution other than using a third party, until what happened was that technology evolved very fast and very forward. And, you know, I'm guessing you all know that this phone that we are all holding is actually a computer, which is stronger than the first IBM that sent a spaceship to the moon. That means that humanity now has extensive computing power that enables us to create tools that can solve a lot of issues that could not be solved before, okay? And it also allows us to keep track of ownership without using that centralized entity. And how does that work? Imagine a situation where all of us here in this conversation decide that we work together as a network, and we keep track of all the transactions and all the ownership that is happening amongst us in this group, okay? That means that we all take out, let's say, a piece of paper, the same size, the same amount of rows, and we all start writing all of the transactions in our group, okay? So let's say I write, Meirav transferred 1,000 euros to Martha, okay? And then the next line would be Martha transferred 50,000 euros to Esther, and Esther transferred 20,000 euros to Elite. And we could continue keeping track, all of us together, or all writing this down. At some point, this paper will end. And if at that point, we all decide to do a calculation that we decided upon ahead of time, and let's say the amount of transactions multiplied by the amount of people divided by the sums, we should all reach the same solution for that calculation. And if we all reach that same solution, that means that we all know that we've written the same thing. That means that we can take that piece of paper that each one of us wrote and put it in our file cabinet, open a new paper and start writing again, okay? We've just created a new block. And that's the idea of blockchain. Now notice what happens in this situation. The data is not stored with one centralized entity. It's stored on all of us databases, right? Like we have 40 people here, it would be 40 different databases. That means that if one of us was breached, we have another 39 copies. If one of us starts favoring another, we'd find that out right here in the calculation, because he'd be getting a wrong calculation. If we saw it a few times, we could say, you know what, you don't really belong on our network, right? And it would stop the third party from, getting ideas of, okay, pay me money because I'm the middleman. And the idea is that this solution of blockchain solves this problem of using a third party as the one that is keeping track of people's ownership. Okay. Now, just to make sure we all know that, first of all, you know what? Let's stop here and ask: does everybody understand what blockchain is? Okay. After this explanation, is there somebody that has any questions about blockchain? Does the quiet mean that everybody understands?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, good. Okay, so now that we understand what blockchain is, and we understand that every piece of information is not kept with one person, but rather with many entities, we can see what we can do with it. What can we do with this technology? So the first thing that was done with this technology was to create digital currencies. Okay, and the first one that came out along with blockchain was Bitcoin in 2009. Okay, and the idea is that if you keep track of this digital currency, you don't need the centralized entities like banks to keep track of who owns what and what transactions happen. And that's why you can see that blockchain-based digital currencies do not actually use the same traditional banking and monetary system, right? And we can also use digital currencies or blockchain in another way, and that's where NFTs come into use. Okay, so alongside the regular digital currencies that people use in order to create transactions and pay, Bitcoin or Ethereum, a new kind of use can be created, which is what NFTs are. Okay, and that is the ability to keep ownership of assets themselves. Okay, and this is where NFTs come into the picture. And remember that I said that we have a certificate of ownership that shows that we are actually holding or the owners of a specific asset. Then this is what is being kept on the blockchain when we're creating NFTs. Okay, so when we create an NFT, we know who owns a specific asset. Okay, and when the NFT is traded from one person to the other, that means that the ownership is traded along with it. And actually, not only that, but what a person can be doing with this asset that is marked by an NFT is also written there in something that is called a smart contract, which we're not going to be going into. But the idea is that inside that node of code that we have that says who owns what, we can also program a set of rules, okay, which gives rights to the owner of that certificate. Okay, so any questions until now about what NFTs are? We can just see them as a proof of ownership that is not kept at a centralized entity like we're used to, but rather kept on many different databases that know who owns what. Okay, so any questions until here? Are we clear about the idea of what NFTs are, and we can move on to why they're non-fungible?
Yep.
All right, okay, so the next step is why non-fungible. What does non-fungible mean? Okay, so first of all, the word non-fungible means that they are not replaceable or they are not interchangeable. Okay, and if I want to explain that, let's look at this. If I held a coin of €1 and another coin of €1, okay, could I switch them amongst each other? Yes, because they're worth exactly the same. They're worth €1. Okay. If I hold one Bitcoin or another Bitcoin, they're interchangeable. There is no difference between them, right? Okay. But if I'm holding a certificate of ownership, let's say of a car, and a certificate of ownership on a house, they cannot be interchangeable because each one of them has a unique value because each of them is unique. Okay. So that's the meaning of they're not interchangeable, they're non-fungible. That's why they're called non-fungible tokens. Okay, so do we now understand the non-fungible part? Give me feedback, people. If there are questions, now is the time to ask, because now we can see, we can continue delving deeper, but I want to make sure that all of us understand the idea and the underlying technology.
Yes, I do.
Okay, anybody have questions until now?
Yeah, there's a question. What is the value? Is it the same?
What is the value of what is the value of what? Of an NFT?
Thea?
Yes, I'm sorry, typo. No, my question was, what if the value is the same? So for instance, my house is worth, well, let's dream big, $2 million. And I want to interchange it with, well, you have a very expensive car, maybe also $2 million. Is it then interchangeable?
Well, it wouldn't be, it's not the same product, is it? Each one of them is different. I mean, the car has its own specifications and the house has its own specifications. So maybe the value at the same time is the same, but that's just like a, you know, that could happen, you know, with a pair of Gucci shoes that are on sale, another pair of Nike that were, you know, marked by Michael Jordan, but that doesn't mean that they're the same product, are they? So
okay, so the requirement is not to have the same value, but to have the exact same specifics. So for instance, if Bitcoin had the same value as a different coin, that could also not be interchangeable, or?
No, well, that's different because there are many Bitcoins and amongst themselves, they're all interchangeable, right? And there are many Ethereums amongst themselves, they're interchangeable, right? You could trade things, right? You could pay more and you can pay less, but this is like a certificate of ownership. This is like saying that something unique in the physical world or the digital world, this is the card that represents the ownership of it, okay? So I could be owning a house or I could be owning a car, but every one of them is unique, right? Each car that is created has its own serial number, right? And each house that is built has its own specifications, right? And right now like each one of them is unique. Therefore, the certificate of ownership is also unique for that product, okay? And they're not the same as opposed to €1 and another euro that can be traded amongst themselves because, you know, it doesn't matter which euro you're holding. Here, if you're holding a token that represents a unique asset, it's not the same as holding the token of another unique asset. And is this clear enough? Is it now clear?
Yeah, but I can imagine that maybe someday you can trade.
Oh, you can trade amongst them, of course. It doesn't mean that you can't trade, but they're not interchangeable. That means that if you're owning, it's like a kid, okay? I have 3 kids. Each one of them is unique, or somebody else could have like a.
So they say.
Yeah. No, you know, this is a really nice example that a friend of mine, lawyer Jaguar, if you guys heard about her, she gave this example about her kid, right? And she was saying, she was explaining to her 7-year-old kid what NFTs are, and she said, you know, you're a 7-year-old boy, you have brown hair, you have brown eyes, you're this tight and you're this skinny, and I'm sure that there's another 7-year-old boy that has the same specifications, but are you fungible? Could we trade you guys? And he was like, obviously not. And that's kind of like the explanation, because each person is unique. So it's just like every asset is unique, or every I'd say unique asset can have ownership or can have like its own unique value, and it's different from another thing that looks the same, but it's not interchangeable, right? There's one per kid and another kid. And then he started thinking and says, okay, so we should do NFKs, non-fungible kids. So,
there's another question, Meirav, from
sure.
Mike Hornum. How would you classify an NFT from a taxonomy point of view? As a crypto asset, as a value token, or?
Oh, that's so interesting. Okay, so the whole issue about regulation, we have a few slides about that. And this is something that the regulators are also asking themselves, and different jurisdictions have different answers, okay? And because this issue is quite new, there are many debates about, we're going to be speaking a little bit about them if we reach that point, about what is this? Is this kind of like a security? Is it a kind of, when does it become a security? Can an NFT be a security? And the answer is yes, obviously. And in what cases does that happen? We're going to reach that question. Okay. So do we understand NFTs right now, what they are, and we can start looking at what is happening with them and why the big hype? Can we continue?
Yep.
Yay. All right. So if we kind of like take a look at when the NFTs were introduced to the world, the first known NFT was created in 2014, and it was a video clip, and the creator registered it on one of the blockchains and sold it for only $4, okay, during a live presentation at a conference in the New York City Museum, new museum in New York. And it wasn't yet named an NFT. It was called a monetized graphics. And the NFT market started growing in 2017 when one of the video games started selling images of cats called crypto kitties, like the picture of what you're seeing here on the side, okay, as part of the computer game. And they just started selling them. And that's when NFTs kind of like started, growing amongst the people that were more gamers and more, I'd say more in the technology area. And what happened was that if the market was only worth $42 million like 3 years ago, by the end of 2020 it had grown by 705% to 33 million in value. But what happened was that during 2021 the industry started growing very dramatically, and now it's surpassing $40 billion, okay, after a number of high profile sales, which include, I think the biggest one that people have seen, and that's when NFTs kind of like took center stage, was when Beeple, an artist, sold this picture. Okay, it's a digital picture that represents 5,000 creations of his. He's an artist. And he sold all 5 of them together as a JPEG image that's called Every Days, the first 5,000 days. Okay. And his story is very interesting. I think that the nicest kind of like explanation about this artist, Michael Winkelmann, I think his name is, he calls his name, it goes under the name Beeple, is recorded in a nice chapter by Nas Daily, if you guys see it, that explains kind of like the history of what happened here. And he was an artist and he started painting, and his first pictures, which you can see right up here in the top left corner, whoops, were very basic. And then he continued painting and drawing every day for 5,000 days. And he started gaining a lot of interest and followers. And what happened was that he decided to sell all 5,000 pictures. And he did that actually through Christie's in an auction. And it was very interesting because a few glass ceilings were broken with this artifact. First of all, it was sold for $69 million, which is the highest price for a living, the third highest ever for a living artist. Okay, so first of all, the price is very, very high. The second thing is that it was the first time that Christie's ever offered a digital only piece of art. Okay, there is no physical piece of art with it. Okay, and the third thing is that Christie's was able to take and was willing to take Ethereum, okay, a digital currency, as a payment for this product. Okay, which is very interesting if you're a person that is interested in digital currencies and their merge with the traditional world. It's a really big step forward. And when this art piece came out to the world, it created a very big interest, because how is it possible that a digital product could be sold for so much money? Okay, it kind of like broke a glass ceiling. The next thing that happened was that that Jack Dorsey sold his first tweet for $2.9 million. Okay, and what does that mean, that a person sells his tweet? Okay, and what does that mean if a person owns another person's tweet? But it happened. Somebody was willing to pay $2.9 million for that, and all of the money went to charity. And whoever bought this tweet received an autographed digital certificate that they owned the first tweet of Jack Dorsey, who was the creator of Twitter, and it was minted on the blockchain, right? So this kind of like raised a lot of questions and a lot of interest. And I think that the next milestone happened with one of the, I think this is like the one of the biggest or most expensive NFT collection created yet, and this is the Bored Ape Yacht Club, okay, which is actually 10,000 computer generated pictures of apes. As you can see, for each one of them has a little bit of difference in the way they look. And it was a collection that was created in April 2021. And each one of them was sold at the beginning price of $200. Okay, that was the price of each of these monkeys. And the whole collection was sold out in one day. Okay, and the cheapest one a few days ago was worth $280,000. Okay, and the market cap of this project is over $2.8 billion right now. And the monetization for the creators of this project were not only from the initial sale, but also from the royalties of trading hands. Okay, and the interesting thing is that this project also introduced, I'd say, the connection between a digital project and real world elements. Okay, what they did here was they actually created a club that is like I'd say kind of like a unique club for people that have these apes, and they created concerts and events, and they had a licensing deal with Adidas. And the thing is that it grew and grew and grew to the point that it is actually held by celebrities now, and people that use it as a status symbol. Okay, so I think one of the interesting points was when Jimmy Fallon showed a printout of Paris Hilton's Bored Ape, and he holds an ape and she holds an ape, and each one of them paid between $200,000 and $300,000 for that one ape. But people are buying these pictures and they're showcasing them as status symbols of, I have this much money, and they could, this is how much I'm worth. Just like people, that this is another nice example. I'll get to it, but it kind of like became a status symbol, and it raises a lot of questions about hype. But when you think about it and you're thinking about status symbols, it's kind of like not weird when you look at real world or physical world status symbols. And there's another good example of by Jaguar that she said, who of us holds watches, right? Physical watches. And who of us holds luxury brand watches, okay, that could be worth a lot? And why do we even hold them if we can see the time on our screen of our cell phone? Okay, why are we wearing the Rolex watches? Why are we wearing the Gucci watches? Because it is a status symbol. Okay, and you can see that all around us. Status symbols are things that humans use. So why, if they're using them, why would they not use it in the digital world if they're already using it in the physical world? So that's one of the places that, if we're looking around us and looking at the NFT craze, we can look at it from the prism of looking of how humans are kind of like looking for status symbols, even in the digital world. And that kind of raises the question, if we're looking at the hype, and kind of like if I've been around, I was a programmer in the .com era, right? So I saw the hype regarding the internet, and then I saw the .com bubble burst, and then I was around when blockchain was the hype, and then I saw when the blockchain winter came, and it's it's not a secret. I think all of us have lived through it or seen the cycle model of technology adoption and the hype period, which is here, right? People are buying, and everybody's crazy about it. And you can see that there's suppliers going in, and there's activity with mass media. Hype begins, and I think we're somewhere around here with NFTs. And then comes the part where people start understanding, wait, maybe there's, maybe this is not exactly what we're expecting. Maybe this is not happening. And then after the winter comes, or the .com bubble burst, or the technology is less attractive, start the real world implementations, which are the interesting ones. And we're going to be taking a look of where NFTs could be going when the technology evolves to this point of adoption. And just remember that this graph doesn't necessarily happen in a sequential way. It could happen like there is a hype, but at the same time, the developments are happening that are going to be the developments that are going to be the real world implementations. But in any case, after having said that, another thing that is still feeding this hype and feeding us right here around this area is everything that has to do with the metaverse. And this kind of like needs to kind of like, we need to stop here, and I'll explain again. what the metaverse is so that we can all kind of like understand and see how NFTs are connected to the metaverse. Okay. So what we're seeing here is a picture of the Microsoft meeting room in the metaverse. Okay. People come in. Each human is represented by an avatar, which is his digital representation, and they can sit down and have a meeting. So that means that theoretically we could be having, if we would be having this lecture that we're having right now in Zoom, if we would have been having it in the metaverse, then each one of us would have an avatar, and we choose how we want that avatar to look like, and we choose what that avatar is wearing, right? And maybe I'd be inviting you to my personal meeting room on the metaverse, right? And all of you would come, and I would want to showcase my work or what I've done or how beautiful my house is, or every other status symbol that humans use, right? We could be using that in the metaverse as well. So what is the metaverse? If I kind of like put it down in the way it's written in Wikipedia and around us, it's a network of 3D virtual worlds focused on social connection. Now, until a few years ago, it was something out of like science fiction movies, and only gamers saw it when they were going into different games, and they saw, the graphic design and how advanced they had become. And everyone, let's say if you have kids that are playing Fortnite, then you see them going in, they have their soldier, and they're like interacting with each other, and they're moving around this world that is actually completely digital, right, and virtual. Okay, and the thing is that in 2021, we started seeing more serious companies entering into the metaverse and starting to, let's say the business sector going in and starting to think of it seriously as a use case of creating digital alternatives to the real world. And I think that the lockdowns and COVID, with everybody at home and people starting to work remotely, kind of like gave a big push to the idea of having a metaverse. And instead of us, let's say, meeting on Zoom, we could be meeting in the metaverse, right? So Facebook changed its name to Meta, and it's and we've seen other companies that are metaverse focused, and they're starting to create content and ideas into this kind of like digital world. And what does it mean? What are we going to be seeing in this digital world? And when we're talking about 2022 and where things are headed, it seems that it's becoming as real as the material world, and we're actually seeing that people are starting to create things in the metaverse that go beyond the playing games and chatting between avatars. And we're talking about people buying assets. Okay, we see projects that are selling land on the metaverse. Look, there's a project called Decentraland, okay, and Sandbox, which are selling land and bulletin boards and places to put advertisements, everything on this metaverse. Okay, so that means that theoretically, if we would be sitting right now and having this meeting, let's say in this Microsoft meeting in the metaverse, theoretically I could have here a wall with ad place, which I would be selling ads to people that are coming to see me in and us talking in this space in the metaverse. Okay, and the idea is that when you start thinking about this, it's limitless what you could be doing in this virtual world, especially if it feels so real. And the idea is that every product or every asset that you see in the metaverse could be sold as an NFT. That means that this ad space over here could be sold as an NFT, and then whoever puts an advertisement, I would be getting royalties because those are the terms that are defined in the NFT section of that part. Okay, and I could be choosing clothes for my avatar, or a Rolex watch for that matter, right? Because I want to show the status symbol for my avatar. Okay, and some people are saying that the representation of the avatar is going to be more important than the representation of us in the real world, because if we're going to be spending our time digitally on the metaverse, that's where we want to be showing and showcasing our status symbols and what we are doing and everything else around that. And it's not a far-fetched idea, because that I think the average right now of people spending time digitally on Facebook and Instagram is somewhere around the 3 to 5 hours a day, which is crazy. But if that's where the world is going, then why not take it to the next level with all these graphics and start having people be able to do whatever they were doing in the real world, do that through the metaverse. Okay, so before I take the implications about that and how NFTs could be used here and how this is pushing the hype, first of all, do we understand what the metaverse is? Do we have questions about the metaverse?
No?
No, well, my question would be actually, because we had a small chat a couple of days ago, of course, but because I did notice, of course, Facebook, and there are several platforms available now to create your own metaverse? And what would be your top 3 to look out
Which
for?
ones?
For the environments where you can create, for instance, your own metaverse?
I'd be looking at here. Okay. The players that are here are not necessarily the players that are here. Okay. If we're looking at AOL before Google, AOL was here. Okay. Google was here. Facebook was created here. Amazon was created here. They were not created here. Okay. So what we're seeing right now are the companies that are here. How many of them are going to be the ones that last in the long term? That's something that you need to sit down and analyze and look into and see which one is run properly and which one has a business case and which one has all the rest. Like, you know, I would look at it as just like as you're looking as an investor, right? If you want to buy land on the metaverse, then you're like an investor. If this metaverse disappears and becomes nullified because somebody else is going to be taking over the market, then you don't want to put your money there, right? So you should be looking at it from the point of view of an investor. Is the project good? Who are the users? What partnerships do they have? Do they have a real use case, the business case that could keep them afloat monetarily in the long term, and not just, you know, because then, you know, people invested into them and then there's nothing offered there. Okay, so everything that you'd be looking at as an investor, you could be looking at and checking the different metaverses from that kind of like scope of view. I hope that answers your question. Okay. So now that
there's one question.
Sure.
Maybe good to, and I'm not sure if you're going to tackle it. You already touched upon that a little bit. Is what's the business model of the metaverse? So how do you make money?
Oh, okay. So this is very interesting because the alternatives are kind of limitless. Okay. Obviously, the first one that we just spoke about is you create a metaverse and then you sell the land there, and or you rent the land, or you create land which is NFT'd, and then people that are buying the land get rent from other users, right? You can also do that. You can start with that. The other use cases would be creating NFTs for the metaverse, and this is where part of what's driving the NFT craze is the idea that the moment that you have a metaverse, any element inside that metaverse could be created into an NFT, right? Because let's say if you're a clothes designer and you're creating clothes for the metaverse, you could be selling them as NFTs. And that means that the person wearing it would be paying you royalties, right? So you could be making money as a clothes designer for the metaverse, right? And if you're a Gucci, we're going to see Gucci, they also started. If you're Gucci, you could be creating bags and clothes for the avatars in the metaverse. And again, you're going to be using NFTs, and whoever buys that, you know, and then people could trade them, and there could be vintage NFTs of clothes of Gucci that are actually virtual. Okay, so I'd say that the alternatives are limitless, and if we take it another step forward, imagine the amount of data that is being created per person the moment that he's inside the metaverse. Okay, and what if that data was NFT'd? Okay, and what if that data was utilized, and it could be utilized in different ways. Look at the business model of Google and Facebook, right? They're utilizing the data that we're creating on our social media, and that's a business model in itself. So theoretically, if somebody creates a metaverse or somebody creates NFTs and is collecting that data, how much is that data worth? Okay, what's the business model of that data? And for the second question, obviously, which continues to be asked is, who should be the owner of that data that is being generated by the different users? Okay, so there are many different. There are very many different use cases of where money could be created the moment that we're moving into a virtual world, which would take over a lot of hours of time that humans are awake, right? So and it's kind of like when the first settlers came to a new continent, and what were the opportunities and what is needed. And you can look at the metaverse as like a new continent that humanity is going into. And now you can ask yourself, what would be the needs of people moving to this new continent? And if you're the supplier of those needs, then you have a business model, right? So I hope that answers.
Legislation moving in that area, Meirav? Because in Europe, we have the whole data sovereignty legislation coming. I think that's interesting to see how that's potentially already linked to the metaverse. I guess not
yet, but that's going to be very, very interesting, because there is I'd say there is kind of like a point of friction between the regulators and everything that has to do with data. Okay, there is an anomaly that is happening right now in the world, and we're all aware of it, that the data that is generated by users is not necessarily monetized by the users, but by another third party company. And the question is, are the regulators going to be strong enough in changing business models of tech giants and enabling the creators of this data to be the owners of the data, right? This is something that I think that all of us that are in the field of financial technology are well aware of this anomaly, and I think that this anomaly becomes more and more pronounced the moment that data becomes the main point of our life. And if we're moving to the metaverse, it's going to be, you know, how much data is going to be generated here. It's going to be like gazillions of pieces of data that could be accumulated and used in different ways and monetized. So I think that I haven't yet seen regulations regarding the metaverse and the ownership of data, but generally, if the regulators solve the problem of the data with what's happening in, I'd say in the social media or the big tech giants around the world, it would be interesting to see if they would apply it for the metaverse, because it's the same problem exists here, but you know, on steroids.
Yeah,
So,
I think that Europe is the place to be, if we look at regulation.
yeah,
But actually,
yeah.
I think the key takeaway is to NFT your data as soon as possible, if that's possible.
Oh, that's
I
something.
mean, then you fix it. Yeah.
Exactly, and that's a very interesting necessity in this world, and we're waiting for somebody to pick up that glove and say, okay, data belongs to humans, NFT this data, and give them the right to monetize what they're generating actually. But let's continue seeing examples of assets being sold for the metaverse with NFTs. So what we're seeing here is a digital home that was sold for $500,000, okay? And it doesn't exist in the real world. It's called the Mars House, and it's it could be, you know, it's just sold as art, but connected to the metaverse. That means that I would buy a house on the metaverse, and I would pay $500,000 for that house on the metaverse, and then I'd invite your avatars to come and visit me there. Who says that's not going to be, you know, possible, or if that's not the direction that things are going to be going? And again, as you know, as I said, there are metaverses that are already selling land in this kind of way, and then people designing it. And what about, you know, virtual malls and all the rest of it? And how far is this going? Is this a development going to go? Is it a hype, or is it the future of where humanity is going? So that's, I think, an interesting question for all of us to see. And if we kind of like take a look outside the metaverse for a moment and see new implementations that are created by traditional players, we could see a few interesting examples. Okay, so we have artists that are, let's say, the Kings of Leon, which is a pretty well-known band. They sold about $2 million through NFT song sales. Okay, and the Times Magazine created collections of their first page, right? What we see here, okay? And they sold that, their covers, right? And they sold this collection as NFTs, which is also kind of like, if we're looking at what the use cases for the NFTs are. So we said usages for the metaverse, status symbols. We can see it. There's another use case, which is actually collectibles, okay? And we're going to be seeing how these are implemented in a few slides from now, because that's another place where we're seeing it. And I think that the most exciting news regarding NFTs came just, I think this was yesterday. Yesterday was the 9th, right? Yeah, this was yesterday. Alfa Romeo came out with an NFT that is connected to its car, okay? Now, the NFT shows not only the ownership, but also the different elements of the car itself, the gas consumption, the servicing, the mileage, the faults, okay? And that means that when this car is going to be sold to the next owner, all of this data is accumulated in that NFT, which will be transferred, remember, the certificate of ownership, to the next user, okay? And here's a really nice example of a real world product that, you know, you could say cars are interchangeable, but after their first few miles, they're not interchangeable anymore, right? Because this car drove this and that amount of miles, and this car drove less, and this one has this kind of gas consumption, and then the value of the car could actually be interchangeable between the different, I'd say even the same model, the same year, the same everything. But then if the different elements inside there have different value, then obviously the certificate of ownership, the NFT, would be worth a different amount, right? So this is a very interesting implementation of where NFTs meet the real world, or the traditional world, or even the physical world, and where they could come in handy. Gucci started playing with creating a virtual world for on the sandbox, and they're creating NFT products there, and they had a big launch a few weeks ago. And not only them, but also Nike and Adidas are playing with the NFT market. And this is very interesting. They're not only creating sneakers, but actually there's a lawsuit right now that's starting to take place between Nike and a company that had used their symbol of Nike as an NFT. Okay, and why are they using a royalty that does not belong to them, right? It belongs to Nike. So how could an NFT creator create something that is using a trademark of a different company and selling it? And now the question is kind of like raises a big question for the regulators again, because okay, so where, like, how do rectify this? Okay, who needs to pay back? The owner of the NFT that bought it and bought, it's a, what is that, a fake Nike symbol or something, or whatever that is. Do they have any ownership? Where does the money come back to them, right? It's not simple if you look at it from I'd say the regulatory or lawsuit kind of point of view, because it's kind of like we're treading into areas that we haven't been there before, right? Another example is Disney, that also entered the NFT world. And this is kind of like where you can see that NFTs are also used as collectibles, right? And then and the idea of holding a whole piece of collection of different digital assets is like, it was kind of like compared to holding collectibles of pictures of famous artists, right? Like Andy Warhol or other artists, right? And you have a whole collection of them. And then the idea of NFTs also, I think this is also something that's driving the hype, because it's not just a status symbol, it's also for people that are, people that like collecting things. Why don't they collect different kinds of digital assets? What's the difference, right? If you're collecting thumbnails or whatever that is, what's the difference between that and collecting digital assets, right? So the question if NFTs are going, and if we're in the middle of a hype or at the beginning of the hype, or for the real use cases, which we're seeing, maybe the Alfa Romeo is a real use case of I'd say a more advanced kind of implementation of NFTs. We're seeing this happening in many traditional companies. Twitter is integrating NFTs, and Facebook, as we said, is talking about the metaverse, and Nike is there, and Coinbase is there, and Warner Bros are already there. So we're seeing that NFTs are almost everywhere. And the question is, okay, so all right, so the giants are playing with this, great, they know how to make money, but what about other kinds of people and minorities and groups that do not necessarily have the assets to start creating a lot of money? And this is where NFTs are becoming very, very interesting, because even in the sense of digital collectibles or art being sold, there are a few use cases that are very, very interesting in this time. Okay, and I bought just two of them, of kids that have created collections of NFTs. One of them is a 12-year-old artist that generated $1.6 million with her NFT collection of the long neck ladies. She has a whole collection of pictures of long neck ladies. They all have these necks, and some of them have different colors of hair and earrings and different elements. And she sold this, and she's just a 12-year-old girl. Okay, and another example is a 12-year-old boy who made 1 million creating NFTs. And look what he's saying. Okay, he decided to create a whole collection of whales because someone who owns 1,000 bitcoins is called a whale, and there are a lot of whales out there. And he learned about NFTs, and and he understood that they could buy them, that you could buy them for cheap or create them, and then they could be sold for a lot of money. And he started playing with it, and he sold his whole collection. Okay, and he became fascinated with it, and it started being it started as a project, and the kid made $1 million, right? And these are just two examples. You can see a lot of artists that were struggling, and suddenly they have their own collections, and they're selling what they're creating as NFTs, and they're finally generating money for their art. And not only that, it's very clear who the owners of art are, because if we take a look at, there is a real world problem of how do you mark art or digital art and ownership of it, right? Not only pictures, but also pieces of audio or video. Who do they belong to? Okay, who benefits, who monetizes these pieces of digital assets, right? And so I think this is like another element that's kind of pushing the NFT market forward, because there really is a problem in the world of how do you mark ownership over digital assets, right? and digital creations or art as, you know, in itself. Like all of us download pictures from the internet. Are we paying the royalties properly? Is there a system that can capture the royalties that should be paid to whoever created that piece of art or, you know, the digital product? So NFTs could solve that real world problem, right? So the idea is that with NFTs, it's kind of like liberating different, I'd say, parts of society. First of all, anybody can create an NFT. So that's the first part of it, right? But not only that, if people can start creating ownership of their assets, that means that it's liberating a lot of people that do not necessarily realize that they have assets, but they do, right? All of us are generating data. So that's an asset, right? So the idea of this technology has, like, there's a hope here that could help diverse people from different backgrounds kind of like enter into, I'd say, a more monetized society that enables them to generate their wealth in a non-traditional way. Okay, and that's even before we start speaking about projects that go to charity, or there's, let's say, there's an interesting project that's called the Positive Body Image Project, something like that, which brings pictures of women with different body shapes, you know, and some of them are tall and some of them are short and some of them have hair in this color and that color, and the real different kinds of looks of people, and everything is okay. You know, why do we need to have like one standard of how people should look, and who says that that's the standard of beauty, right? So NFTs could also be used as, I'd say, social projects to push forward ideas and agendas and ideologies.
Meirav, you have
A question?
approximately 5 to 10 minutes left.
All right, so let's rush through the rest. Okay, I'll just rush through the rest. There are marketplaces. We had a question about where are the marketplaces. The biggest one is OpenSea. You can see that there are other marketplaces as well. OpenSea is the biggest one of them. And let's see if we can skip this part. Okay, so a few considerations regarding NFTs, and this is something that we can, there's like, we could talk about this for hours, okay? What are the considerations when I'm creating an NFT, and what are the considerations when I'm buying an NFT, what is rarity, and how do I generate a project that is, makes a lot of money? There are a lot of projects out there that, you know, create a lot of NFTs and they're not making money. So what differentiates it? Is it just marketing? What elements of marketing do I need to be using when I'm creating an NFT project? And also when I'm a buyer, what exactly am I getting? Okay, what does that smart contract with the certificate of ownership enable us? Does it also give me legal rights? Does it give me copyrights? Does it give me intellectual property? And this is something that's completely open right now. I mean, a person could buy an NFT and then find out that they don't have any copyrights there, or they don't have any intellectual property with it. Okay, and these are questions that are completely open right now, and so anybody that's buying NFTs also needs to think about that aspect. So I'm going to skip through these different considerations. I go deeply into them. We have an NFT course, so if anybody's interested in creating or buying or generating NFTs, you know, you're welcome to join the course, and we can delve into these aspects much deeper. And I think that the most interesting thing is, what is the future and where is this going? And we spoke a lot about the ownership of data. That's one of the ideas and one of the directions that this could go. But NFTs could also solve necessity of ownership of physical world assets, not only digital world assets, without using the third party. Okay, and there is, let's say, look at this over here. If we look at the house here in this picture, it's a real house in Florida that is actually sold as an NFT. Okay, the real estate agent actually created an NFT for this house. She created it through a company that she created, a limited liability company, and the ownership is transferred to whomever is buying this house. Okay, so what does that mean? If Alfa Romeo is creating this and houses could be also marked with NFT ownership, what does that mean to governments? And what does that mean to you know, car dealerships or wherever, you know, each country there's like whoever writes the ownership of houses and cars? Do we still need them? Can we avoid them? Can we, you know, become decentralized and not have a centralized entity that deals with the ownership of everything? What does that mean for governments? And where is there like a grasp on you know, keeping track of assets and ownership? I'm right at the end. So I think that if we kind of like look at this and kind of like, zoom out. It's really interesting kind of like to see how innovation kind of like has a ripple effect. It started with Bitcoin and blockchain, and look, we're 12 years, 13 years forward. And I think we're just touching the surface of what can be done with a decentralized database and with assets and digital assets that could be stored on this decentralized database. And in each of the aspects that we've been talking about, there's a whole world of information and thoughts and ideas and growth that could be created. And I guess that the main question is where are things going to end up when the dust settles. And I think that's kind of like up to all of us to create, right? So I'd like to first of all thank you guys for being such a great audience. And I'd like to end before the questions with a sentence that I really like by Gordon Moore, one of the founders of Intel, which goes like this. It says that change has never happened this fast before, but it'll never be this slow again. So thank you guys.
Thank you, Meirav. I have a question from the audience. What is the main difference in, I think, mining NFTs on Ethereum as compared to Polygon?
All right.
Very
so here's an
specific
issue.
question. Yeah.
Very specific question. Okay. So most of the NFTs are created on Ethereum. Ethereum is a project that was created a few years back, and it introduced the whole idea of smart contracts, okay, which are contracts or programs that are embedded into digital tokens, digital currencies. The idea with Ethereum is the prices that they take for transactions, okay? They call it gas fees, okay? And they could be seen as fees that you have for any traditional world, kind of like when you pay for a service, okay? And the problem with Ethereum, even though now it's used, mostly it is used for NFT projects, is that when you want to trade or when you want to move hands from one owner to the other, you pay a pretty hefty gas fee, okay? Which could cost quite a lot. Let's say people that studied in one of my courses, we created we created their certificate of finishing the course with an NFT of their certificate, right, of finishing the course. And the thing was that in order for them to take ownership of that, they needed to, each one of them or us, we needed to pay $50 just for the transfership of ownership from to the hand of another person. Okay, so that's kind of like where there's it's kind of like ripe for competitors to come and compete with Ethereum on where to create NFT projects. And that's where Polygon comes in, and there are other blockchains that are also entering into this area, because they're saying, we don't have to continue working with Ethereum. So what if it's the biggest one? We could cut the gas fees and give other benefits to whomever is creating NFTs on different projects. So I hope that answered this question.
Yeah. And another point that Attila Agri is making is she points out that governments will not allow not being at least copied in on NFT sale.
Well, I think this is interesting, and this is kind of like where the dust settles.
Too.
Yeah. And this is a very interesting interaction, because I think that if we kind of like zoom out and look at what's happening and kind of like look at it in a historical perspective, in the eyes of like what's happening with humanity, we're kind of like seeing an evolution that is happening right now around us on many different aspects. Okay, we are seeing that money, we have new types of money, right? Central bank digital currencies, or digital currencies that are decentralized, right? Is this a new step in the evolution of, of money and currencies, right? It started out with bartering, and then seashells and gold and all the rest of it. And then, country created or government created currencies. And then suddenly we have, user generated currencies. And now we're talking about central bank digital currencies, right? So we're kind of like in the middle of, I'd say, of a very fast paced evolution that is happening, first of all on the monetary area, but also I think that it's happening on the power structures of humanity. Exactly. Because we're seeing corporations that are becoming as strong as governments, if not even stronger than governments. So what does that mean? I mean, we've been talking about this for at least 5 years, that will the new world not be governed by borders between governments and countries, but rather between borders between entities that are actually companies, right? Giants in retail giants, or companies themselves. And are we now experiencing it firsthand? Because if somebody's going to be on the metaverse of Facebook and somebody's going to be on the metaverse of Google, where are the borders? Do they have to do with the physical world? Look, I'm in Budapest right now, and each one of us in a different area, right? What's the difference between the governments? It's not, there's not much difference, but we're right now in the government of Zoom. We could have been doing this on Microsoft Teams. We could have been doing this in different areas, right? So are the corporations the new governments? And how is that power struggle working? Like we're seeing forces that are kind of like clashing because we have the traditional power structures of governments, and we have the banks, and suddenly there's a new financial system, and we have new players, which are the big companies. And how is the dust going to be looking? How is the world going to be looking when this dust settles? I think that's a very important question. Yes, where are the governments going to play a part in whatever's happening in regards to privacy and data and ownership of data, and who creates the laws? I mean, we're seeing, let's say we can take a little step out and look at, we're looking at companies that are deplatforming people that are bringing opinions that do not fit with that company's rules and regulations. But that is not necessarily, I'd say, legal in the sense of, the Constitution in America, right? A president was deplatformed, and you have a lot of people saying, wait, this is not constitutional, and he has the right to say things. And why is the government going over an amendment that's constitutional? But if you're in the Twitter land, then it's fine, right? So I think that this whole question, and we're kind of like in a very interesting place, I think, in humanity is, in general, of this power structure or power struggle between the giants and the traditional world and the new world that is being created right now. And that's even before talking about the metaverse.
Thanks, Meirav. We have to stop this very interesting discussion. And I think we can continue an hour. You have a lot of compliments from the audience. I would like to thank everybody for joining. As said, this has been recorded, so we will share it with you later on and as soon as possible.
My pleasure. It was a real
thank you very much, Meirav.
And thank you for the questions and the invitation. And I'm happy to see that, people kind of like are interested and enjoyed this this talk.
Yes, and it's very interesting to keep track of this. So maybe we should have one end of the year or next year as well and see what happens.
I think in half of the year, we're going to be seeing a completely different picture. Like in June, I think we're going to be seeing every day there's new stuff here.
Yeah.
But then it will not be on Zoom, but in a metaverse, right?
Yeah. I'm guessing it is going to be there. Yeah. It's going to be very interesting.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Bye. I forgot to take screenshots.
Yeah, shoot. We should have done that.
Yeah, I forgot to do it.
But we have the recording, so we can still do that.
Yeah, I'm taking screenshots now of